for me as a director was to sort of embrace the spirit of
They say Ron Howard is too nice to make enemies, and yet for a man who built his career on kindness, humility, and quiet brilliance, even he couldn't escape Hollywood's darker side. For decades Ron has directed some of the biggest stars on earth, and from Tom Hanks to Russell Crowe, navigating egos, tempers and scandals that would drive most directors out of the business. But behind that calm, red-haired smile is a man who's seen it all. The clashes, the betrayals, and the rare moments that tested his patience to the breaking point. Because even the nicest man in Hollywood has limits. Throughout his career, Ron has spoken about certain actors and moments that haunted him. Not because they ruined his movies, but because they reveal just how fragile the balance between genius and chaos can be. These aren't just difficult performers. These are the ones who crossed lines, broke trust, and changed him forever. Some were co-stars from his early television days. Others were mega-stars who made Liffey and set unbearable. But all of them share one thing in common. They forced Ron Howard to confront the one truth he'd avoided for years, and that being kind doesn't always mean being respected. From the jealousies of Happy Days to the public scandals of The Dilemma, these stories peel back the curtain on the man who defined decency in an industry built on ego. This is the untold truth of the 6 people Ron Howard once described as the hardest and at times the most evil ever worked with. It's hard to overstate just how iconic Happy Days was in the 1970s. For millions of Americans, it was more than a sitcom. It was comfort television. And at the heart of it were 2 faces everyone loved. Ron Howard's Richie Cunningham and Henry Winkler's Arthur Fonzarelli. But while viewers saw 2 best friends on screen, behind the cameras, a quiet storm was brewing. Ron Howard was already a household name when Happy Days premiered in 1974. As the former child star of the Andy Griffith Show, he was used to being the center of attention. The wholesome, clean-cut Richie was designed to be the show's moral compass. The everyman the audience related to. Then came Henry Winkler. At first, his leather-jacketed Fonza was meant to appear in just a handful of episodes. But something unexpected happened. America fell in love with him. The cool motorcycle-riding bad boy wasn't supposed to be the lead. Yet week after week, the cheers from the studio audience grew louder. By season 3, Fonza fever had taken over, fan mail flooded in. More than 80% of it addressed to Winkler. Executives noticed, writers noticed, and Ron Howard noticed most of all. He later admitted that it was a strange feeling watching the spotlight shift. In the early seasons, Richie was the focus of nearly every episode, he recalled. But suddenly, the writers were building entire storylines around Fonza. It was like watching the show I knew turn into something else. Reporters began asking uncomfortable questions. Do you feel like a supporting actor on your own show? Howard handled it gracefully, but inside he was struggling. It wasn't jealousy in the petty sense. It was fear of losing control over something he'd helped build. The tension came to a head in 1975 when ABC executives floated a shocking idea: rename the series Phonies Happy Days. Winkler was horrified. I told them absolutely not. He later said it would insult the cast and the audience, but for Ron it was deeper than that. He told producers that if they changed the name, he'd walk. I'll quit the show and go back to film school, he said flatly. Me in it. That was a bold statement for a 21-year-old actor under contract with one of TV's biggest networks. But it worked. The executives backed off. The show stayed Happy Days. Not long after, Winkler and Howard finally confronted the elephant in the room. During a shoot in Arizona, Winkler climbed into Ron's Volkswagen after filming and asked, "Are you okay with how things are going?" Ron didn't hesitate. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "You're doing great work. I'm proud of you. I just had to get over it." That moment changed everything. Winkler later said it cemented their lifelong friendship. That's who Ron is. Honest, humble, and bigger than the business. Decades later, they'd reunite on Arrested Development, proving that whatever early tension existed had evolved into deep respect. Ron even said, "My time on Happy Days was great because of the people I worked with, especially Henry. It was a story of rivalry turned respect, a reminder that even when fame plays favorites, integrity can outlast ego. Fast forward to 2010. Ron Howard is no longer the young actor from Happy Days. He's an Academy Award-winning director known for emotional storytelling and clean reputation. Then comes The Dilemma, a bitty comedy starring Vince Vaughn and Kevin James. The movie seemed harmless enough until its first trailer dropped. In the very first scene, Vaughn looks into the camera and says, "Electric cars are gay." Within hours, the internet exploded. Advocacy groups condemned it. CNN's Anderson Cooper called it offensive and dangerous. Universal panicked and pulled the trailer. And suddenly, Ron Howard, Hollywood's nicest guy, was in the middle of a peer nightmare. Executives wanted the line gone. Publicists wanted an apology. But Howard saw it differently. The line, argued, wasn't about mocking anyone. It was about portraying Vaughn's character. A brash, impulsive man who speaks before thinking. It defines who he is, Howard wrote in an open letter to the Los Angeles Times. The response was mixed. Some praised Howard's defense of creative freedom, others accused him of tone deafness. On morning shows, panels debated whether intent excused impact. Then Vaughn made things worse. "Comedy is about laughing at our differences," he told reporters, a statement that poured gasoline on the fire. The controversy overshadowed the entire film. Van's reputation took a hit and The Dilemma bombed at the box office. Critics called it out of touch and awkwardly insensitive. Howard barely spoke of it afterward. When asked years later, he simply said, "Every controversy fades." But behind that calm response, industry insiders say the ordeal rattled him. It was the first time in his career that Ron's image of universal likability was tested, and he realized how quickly Hollywood's mood could shift. Still, true to form, he stood by his cast and his principles, proving once again that integrity sometimes means standing in the storm alone. By 1995, Ron Howard was a respected director. But one event that year changed everything, and not in the way he expected. Apollo 13 was a triumph. 9 Oscar nominations, rave reviews, global acclaim. Yet, when nominations for Best Director were announced, Howard's name was missing. The industry was stunned. That year, Mel Gibson won for Braveheart. Years later, when Howard finally won for A Beautiful Mind, fate came full circle. Gibson was the one presenting the award. Days before the Oscars, Mel told him backstage, "I'm going to give you an Oscar, buddy." Ron laughed, thinking it was typical Gibson bravado. But when Gibson opened the envelope that night and read Howard's name, the room erupted. Ron turned around in disbelief and asked to see the card himself. Sure enough, there it was, his name printed in bold. That moment said everything about his humility. Even in triumph, he doubted it until he saw proof. Even then, filming was chaos. Cary would improvise endlessly, sometimes ignoring direction, changing lines mid-scene, or disappearing between takes. "He's brilliant," Howard told crew members, "but it's like trying to catch lightning with a butterfly net." In one moment of exhaustion, Ron reportedly stepped off set, disappeared for 15 minutes, and returned, dressed head to toe in a Grinch costume. The crew burst out laughing. So did Cary. The tension broke instantly. From Fennon, they found a rhythm. Howard learned to let Cary's madness lead, shaping the movie around his energy rather than trying to contain it. The result, a box office hit, an Oscar for makeup, and one of the most iconic Christmas films of all time. Years later, Cary would admit, "I was awful to work with." But Ron never cracked. "He's the only director who could have survived me." For Howard, the experience was both agony and triumph, proof that even the most uncontrollable storms can produce masterpieces if the captain refuses to panic. By the mid-1990s, Ron Howard and Tom Hanks were Hollywood's golden duo. Splash, Apollo 13, The Da Vinci Code. They trusted each other completely, but even perfect partnerships have breaking points. During Angels and Demons in 2008, tensions quietly surfaced. The sequel to The Da Vinci Code carried enormous expectations. The Vatican objected to its content. Protesters surrounded the filming locations and security was a nightmare. Hanks, ever the perfectionist, wanted constant rewrites. Howard, juggling studio pressure and location bans, just wanted to keep the schedule alive. Crew members later recalled days when the two would huddle behind closed doors for hours, debating tone and dialogue. It wasn't shouting, it was something colder. Two friends fighting with silence. In one particularly grueling week in Rome, Howard reportedly scrapped an entire day of footage after Hanks disagreed with the emotional direction of a scene. The delay cost $1.2 million still. Ron stood by his star. "If Tom says he needs it, he probably does," he told producers. That trust paid off. Hanks's performance was universally praised, but it wasn't easy. The strain of constant reshoots left Howard physically exhausted. "It was the hardest film I've ever made," he said later. "Every frame was a battle between faith and fear." After the shoot, the two didn't speak for several months, not out of anger, but mutual burnout. When they reunited for Inferno years later, both men joked about it. "We survived angels and demons." Hank said, "That's proof friendship can outlast anything." Behind the smiles, though, it was a reminder that even the strongest creative bonds are fragile, and that sometimes the hardest people to direct are the ones you love most. When Ron Howard cast Michael Keaton in The Paper, 1994, the actor was at a crossroads. He just stepped away from Batman after 2 blockbuster hits, and Hollywood was unsure what to do with him next. Howard saw potential. He wanted to show a side of Catan no one had seen, grounded, human, vulnerable. But Catan wasn't ready to let go of the manic energy that made him famous. From day one, creative friction flared. Howard preferred structured rehearsals. Catan thrived on those. He'd deliver takes that were completely different from one moment to the next. Brilliant, but unpredictable. In one scene, Catan was supposed toward with his editor calmly. Instead, he jumped onto a desk mid-shot and improvised an entire monologue that wasn't in the script. Howard called cut and the crew applauded. The problem, continuity was destroyed and the scene had to be res-hot. Howard admired Catan's brilliance but struggled to contain it. "He's like jazz," Ron told an assistant, "you can't direct him. Oh, you just play along." The tension peaked one night when they argued over a camera angle. Catan wanted the shot close, intense. Ron wanted distance to show the chaos of the newsroom. They went back and forth for 20 minutes until Howard finally said, "Michael, I promise. And if I'm wrong, I'll reshoot it your way." They did it Ron's way. It stayed in the movie. And it worked. After the premiere, Catan reportedly turned to Howard and said, "You were right. Damn it." Years later, during interviews, Catan called Howard the most patient man in Hollywood. Howard smiled and replied, "Michael doesn't make it easy, but he always makes it worth it." It was another reminder that greatness often lives on the edge of chaos. And Ron Howard has learned to walk that edge better than anyone. Ron Howard's story isn't just about directing movies. It's about directing people. From the fiery tempers of actors like Brimley and Carey to the silent tension with legends like Hanks and Catan, every experience has shaped the man behind the camera. He's learned that leadership isn't about control, it's about compassion, that every tantrum hides insecurity and every ego hides fear. Hollywood has plenty of talented directors, but few have survived its storms with their humanity intact. Ron Howard did, not because he avoided conflict, but because he faced it with kindness. And maybe that's the real secret to his success, not the Oscars, not the box office, not the fame, but the quiet strength to stay good in a business that rewards cruelty, because in the end, the hardest people weren't the ones who challenged his authority. They were the ones who tested his heart. And through it all, Ron Howard never stopped being the same soft-spoken redhead who just wanted to tell stories honestly, humbly, and with heart. When Ron Howard first met Russell Crowe, he saw what most directors feared and admired in equal measure: raw, unfiltered intensity. Crowe was fresh off his Gladiator Oscar win. Unpredictable and notoriously difficult on set, but Howard had Avis Ion. He believed that if anyone could channel Crowe's volcanic energy into something human, it was him. That belief was put to the test on A Beautiful Mind. From the beginning, Crowe resisted the idea of portraying John Nash as fragile. "I'm not playing a victim," he told Ron on day one. "I'm playing a man who's fighting for control." Ron respected that, but he also needed the vulnerability, the trembling hands, the lost gaze.